The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another edition of the Nerdcast News Report for Wednesday, February the 19th, 2025. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. And we have a bunch of different news items for you on this Wednesday to get your middle of your week started as we cross over to the back half of the week. We've got some really good stuff for you for today's edition of the Nerdcast News Report. Joining me in studio, as always, to break down all the news items we have for you is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. Yeah, we are making our way through this week. A lot of interesting news this time around. I'm still churning through more and more anime as we go. Got the new Phantom Brave game, starting that out. So
Nice.
Excited about that. And yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, really good stuff. And we'll get a chance to talk a little bit more about some of the current anime as we go forward on episodes of the Nerdcast News Report, as well as some new video games as well. But we're going to talk just a few news items today on this Wednesday edition, and we're going to talk about the business of anime and manga to get things started. We're going to talk about Kadokawa just rolling in the money. News report coming out from Anime Corner that Kadokawa made over $130 million from Oshinoko, ReZero, and more of their top titles. That was just in what they term quarter three, which is October through December of 2024. Topping the list was Oshinoko with over $5 billion in revenue, $32.8 million. You look at some of the other on the list, Delicious in Dungeon, Overlord, ReZero, Konosuba, Pandorobo. I don't know that property. That's looks like mostly a manga property, but maybe one we'll see come to animation at some point. Bungo Stray Dogs, The Eminence in Shadow, All You Sometimes Hides Your Feelings in Russian, and Sword Art Online round out the top 10. But, you know, we've talked a lot on this podcast about how you're going to see a lot of these legacy titles, if you will, just continue to get sequels because they just continue to rake in the money. And sure enough, as we look at this list, there's certainly a handful of things in this top 10 that are on their third or fourth season or have third or fourth seasons on the way. And I guess it shouldn't be a big surprise that it's the revenue driver for Kadokawa in the third quarter.
Yeah, for sure. They even referenced in the article that they basically said they're not looking to increase their productions, but instead create more sequels and more episodes of their current held properties. Looking to increase their in-house studios and improve the quality of the titles while increasing the numbers of episodes. That's great on one hand because if you're a fan of some of these shows, you definitely want more and more of it. But the concern then becomes the quality, which they talk about. But like, not every show needs to be 700 episodes. At what point is it okay? We've bled this thing dry. Let's move on. I think historically there have been those shows that you kind of wish they had carried on and they didn't. Maybe you're not going to run into that as much anymore. Where now these popular and successful shows are going to get their fill, and you're not going to be left wanting more. So I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that's two ways to look at it. That the odds of one of these shows not having the complete story told, maybe too complete, maybe beyond what is actually in the source material, less likely when it's just churning out this kind of money. And again, the risk level is a lot lower because you see these are clearly things that are doing good business for them, both on the anime side and the manga side. And you see that screenshot there. It talks about net sales are up about 12%, operating profit up just over 10%, and net profit almost 100% gain from the previous quarter. So. And you see kind of some of the breakdown if you're into numbers that's included there. We'll jump back to the other document because there's your top 10 as far as yen values and dollar figures. And what's interesting to me, and I'll roll it back up because on the right of this graphic, which is included in that PDF, it has both the publication side, your mangas, and your animation side, and it's interesting to me which shows continue to do well in manga form. You have Sword Art Online at 2. Delicious in Dungeon seems to be doing well across all platforms. Uh, Mushoku Tensei doing very well. Spice and Wolf hanging in there. That's from 2006, and it's still churning along. ReZero, not a surprise to see that continue to do well. Rascal Does Not Dream, another really popular series. Irregular Magic High School up there as well. Any surprises when you look at these lists? Things that jump out at you? Obviously, there's a couple things we don't know, and I guess you could term that a surprise because we just don't know what they are. But this is certainly something a little bit different here.
Yeah, honestly, I guess I'm a little surprised at the staying power of Sword Art Online. I've not read any of the source material. I've only watched the anime, and even that, I kind of dropped off after season 2, and I know it's gone on for numerous iterations since then. But I guess with so many shows kind of that ilk at this point, I'm still kind of amazed that it's hanging around and doing what it's done up to this point.
Yeah, I think that is definitely one that, because there are so many other shows like that now, it's amazing that kind of this show kind of had the staying power to continue to do well, both in the print side and in the video side as well, as we've seen many spinoffs of it coming forward. But on the anime side, I don't think there's any huge shock. Oshinoko obviously driving a lot of the revenue there. ReZero, Konosuba, Overlord continuing to be strong, and that's a 2015 series, so that's the second oldest one on the anime side besides Day Day Live, which has had 5 seasons, I believe. So
That sounds about right.
That continues to do really well.
You kind of see why something like Isekai Quartet exists. When you got Overlord number 2, ReZero number 4, Konosuba number 5, it's like clearly they know they got some popular characters and properties there. How do you further deliver content based on those?
And it begs the question why more companies don't do something like that, because it is kind of a slam dunk. You can create this series that's non-canon to anything these shows are actually doing. You just basically put them in this, school setting, and you just get to use the characters and make more money off
like
of these properties.
Super Robot Wars meets Isekai.
Yeah, for sure.
I kind of wonder why you don't see more of that from like slice of life high school shows. Are they just all owned by separate companies? Because I've watched a lot of shows lately that are kind of that romantic comedy high school setting thing, and even though I don't necessarily need more plot, I wouldn't mind seeing more of those characters and their interactions. I think like the second season of Horimiya, I was fine with the fact that it was basically just bonus material from what wasn't in the first season, because I actually just enjoyed seeing the characters interact with each other. And I think there's probably an appetite for seeing weird crossovers in that realm too.
Yeah, I would totally see that as being something I would be interested in watching, if you could take some of your popular school-based shows and have them end up in the same school and see what happens in that situation. And of course it'd be fun to choose something like, they show up in Classroom of the Elite, and now all of a sudden they have to actually solve puzzles to not get expelled and all this other stuff. So I think there's and again, I would be shocked if we don't see it, because again, all these companies are basically telling you, like, look, if there's a popular franchise, we're going to milk it for every last dime, rather than take a chance on something that maybe doesn't turn out great. And it's not like we're not getting any new material. There's some big shows like Solo Leveling, and that have Dawn to Dawn, like the big titles that are new properties that are being pushed to the moon. So it's not like they're totally abandoning what they think are big hits. It's just, if it comes down to something that's a little smaller and a 7th season of ReZero, you're probably going to get the ReZero season first, and then they'll slide that smaller one in there, or the smaller one's going to have lower animation budget until it hits, and then if it hits, then they can pump it up.
If we end up with 7 seasons of ReZero, I gotta think that would take us to like the 2040s or something like that. As long as it took to get to season 3, don't hold your breath.
Yeah, for sure. This other graphic here, you see the net sales of the top 10 best-selling titles, and there you see Mushoku Tensei, but there's Sword Art Online, number 2. Pon Dorobo, number 3. My Love Story, Yamada-kun at level 999. Eminence and Shadow, Certain Scientific Railgun, another old franchise that's getting a 4th season. Look at that. Like, pops up on this list.
What are the odds?
What are the odds? It's going to get another season. Bungo Stray Dogs, Delicious in Dungeon, My Happy Marriage there. And then you see on the video side as well, again, Oshinoko at the top of that list, which is not a huge surprise. And yeah, it's really interesting to see these numbers and how they're influencing their business decisions, which is why I wanted to lead with it today, because this is really what it comes down to. And we had that anime ranking a week or so ago where they were taking into account piracy and stuff like that, which is still just bizarre. But these, to me, I think, are the numbers they're really looking at. Like, what kind of dollars, what kind of yen are these series making? What kind of jumps are they making? Because that's the other thing is, some of these shows are continuing to gain in popularity all these years later, and that's where it's like, okay, we're gonna potentially churn out some more. Let's do a light novel series. Let's spin it off into a new manga. Let's do a sequel as well, and
it really makes you want to compare the two as far as the ranking list that we looked at compared to the financials from all the companies, and see what shows seem to be huge hits, but aren't maybe they're not being watched in the most legitimate of means very often, and they're not seeing the financial results that they should be. It makes you curious.
The other thing that's kind of interesting is this little. I know you can't see my cursor. Obviously, it doesn't do any good to point that out, but there's a box here in this graphic that mentions the number of new titles from Kadokawa, and obviously you still have Q4 numbers to report, which will be January to March of 2025, but it's pretty close. Like, you look at 2023, fiscal year 2023 compared to fiscal year 2024, and new titles are pacing about the same. So I think that's an interesting number to me.
It's kind of wild that it's like you had the first quarter where they actually outperformed 2023, and they're like, wait, let's scale back a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like, what caused that? Like, was there just a bunch of series that they were ready to release something new on? I don't know, but really fascinating story for sure, and lots of good data. If you're into that sort of thing, check out the article over on Anime Corner, and you can kind of click over and take a look at just the whole breakdown, because it's very detailed, very fascinating, and a real glimpse into the business side of the anime and manga market right now, because it's a hot topic with piracy, with new sources of revenue, new streaming ideas. You kind of want to see what the health of the market is, and Kadokawa clearly doing very well, and they're kind of doing it on the backs of these AAA, if you will, titles that are just continuing to drive revenue for the company.
My fear is that with their relationship with Sony seemingly getting closer, if that's going to somehow impact negatively their performance, because I feel like lately in the news, anything tied with Sony, it hasn't necessarily been a positive thing. It's like every other week there's some news story about Crunchyroll that makes you think they're terrible. Sony can't keep their servers online or your data private. It'll be interesting what the next headlines are that come out around all this.
Well, the good thing is, Kadokawa was pretty good about releasing this stuff publicly, so come April or so, we should get another update on what Q1 or Q4 look like from them, and we'll get an idea if there is some sort of impact from their small business ties to Sony. Obviously, there's a lot of talk of maybe a big buyout or merger, and it looks like it's going to be on a smaller scale. So we'll see if there's some sort of impact there. But interesting stuff. Love the business of anime as well. So it's definitely something nerdy that we'll be talking about on this podcast. Let's roll into some other stories. Just as kind of a fun one. Game Rant listed the 11 best isekai anime that are finished until complete stories ranked. And there could be some on this list that maybe, as a listener, you might not be familiar with. So we'll roll through them real quick, and then we'll get Mike's thoughts. It starts with Aura Battler Dunbine, which came out in 1983. Marching Awakes Romance, which is known better as Mar, came out in 2005. Kiba, which has shown up on a bunch of lists, which is not a show I was real familiar with, 2006. The Familiar of Zero came out in 2006 as well. Magic Knight Rare, certainly recommend that one from 1994-95. Also, you have Recreators, a little more of a modern series, 2017, Now and Then, Here and There, from 1999. Fushigi Yugi, which Mike certainly highly recommends, 95 to 2001. The Vision of Escaflowne, which we both recommend, 1996. Then we get to 12 Kingdoms from 2002, 2003, and their number one was The Boy and the Beast, which is a movie that came out in 2015. As you kind of look through this, what jumps out of that list at you?
Yeah, well, the first thing that jumps out at me is clearly I haven't watched a lot of isekai that are finished and tell complete stories. Looking at this top 10 or top 11, I've watched to its completion Fushigi Yugi and Escaflowne. I clearly need to jump on a few more of these, obviously. Kind of going down the list, though, I think it's wild seeing Familiar as Zero. Worth noting about it that ReZero's creator, Tappei Nagatsuki, got his start writing fanfic for Familiar as Zero. That kind of like spun him into creating the world of ReZero, which is kind of wild. And Magic Knight Rayearth always jumps out at me because the Sega Saturn game released by Working Designs is just comically expensive. Good news, though. Last time I saw it at my local game store, which was probably 2 years ago, they were selling it for $1,000. According to price charting, though, now the complete copy is valued at $890.
Steal. Jump on it now.
Maybe we're getting to some level of normal, but yeah, I feel like I watch. Maybe that's my problem, is that a lot of the isekai I watch have been shows lately that are just really mediocre. I think when it's all said and done, you're gonna see shows like That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime up there in the top. ReZero for sure. Then my question too is, where do you draw the line of what's isekai or not? Because you have a show like Inuyasha.
Yeah.
Is that isekai because technically it's more time travel because Kagome goes back in the past really far, but it still feels like another world, and I know some lists out there do include it. I don't know how that breaks down.
Well, we talked about if you do include Inuyasha, then you would include your boy Kome, which is also technically a time travel, but also a reincarnation story, which is a little bit different. It's a bummer to me when I see a list like this and I don't see El Hazard on the list, because to me it is a classic, and even as we talked about, the alternative world of El Hazard is actually a double isekai, because you have the main cast that got isekai'd out of their school into El Hazard, and then they get isekai'd again into the alternative world of Rashtaria, and so you've got kind of that double layer of it. But just that's a classic to me, and everybody should check that out. And thankfully, most of that stuff, if not all of it's been licensed, rescued, and re-released. So I highly encourage you to check that out. But yeah, I think there's a lot of classic isekai that are at the top of your list when you start looking at the list of the best isekai, regardless of whether it's finished or not, that I think will eventually end up on this list as we move forward.
Yeah, another unfinished one that I know took a while just to complete a single season of the anime, Uncle from Another World.
Yeah.
That one was way better than I thought it would be, and hoping we see more of that in anime form.
I was going to say, if it's going to be, 2027 or 2028?
I'll be watching it with
your
season 7 of ReZero, maybe. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, they had some issues, obviously, with that series, but hopefully if they get some more done, it'll be done in a little more of a timely manner this time. But just a fascinating list. And these lists are really all about debate. And The Boy and the Beast at number 1, I think that, as mentioned in chat, that is one of those, I think, that a lot of people spoke highly of when it came out. And it's definitely on the list of anime movies I need to check out. A lot of good stuff on this list, though. If you're into isekai, I think there's something on this list. And great to see Aura Battler Dunbine get recognition. Probably one of the first isekai, or at least the first that kind of is known as an isekai series listed on there. So if you can get your hands on that, definitely worth checking out. Let's move on to our next topic. And this one, I don't know even how really big of a story this is, but I know Mike's going to fill us in. As we build up to Switch 2, which is coming out in April, or at least the news of it's coming out in April, Nintendo's announced that they are discontinuing their Gold Point rewards program. Loyalty service will end on March 25th. the points points earned before the cutoff date will still be usable and valid for 12 months after they're earned, so you don't have to rush out and immediately spend your points if you have those. Also, Nintendo Switch game vouchers will not be redeemable for Switch 2 games, and there's no word yet if a new point system will be added, although you have to think if they're putting a cap on it, that's probably what they've got in mind, that they're going to create something new for the new system, because that's a great way to incentivize people spending money on your new system, is to give them some sort of rewards. Like, you're certainly farther in the Nintendo verse than I am. I know I wouldn't have that many points, but you kind of looked into it yesterday. Kind of what do you take from all of this?
I think my first takeaway is that I clearly don't pay enough attention to my points and what I'm redeeming. I'm sure there are numerous Nintendo physical games that I've not even registered to accrue points from. Yeah, it's something that was never really on my radar, and I guess maybe that's my own ignorance, but I think I have $1.25 worth of gold points currently. I may have to go and see what I can.
Don't spend it all in one place.
Yeah, maybe there's some DLC I can pick up for one of my games there, but I'm not super surprised. I mean, they mentioned in the article that Switch game vouchers won't be usable on Switch 2 games. Like, well, of course not. They want you spending real money as Switch 2 comes out of the gates. They want to maximize profit. That doesn't surprise me in one bit.
And I haven't even seen people really outraged about it. Like, people kind of like, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think they had a club before this that I think people actually enjoyed much more than any kind of point system thing they have going on. So there's that, but it's a neat little program, but I just don't know if they need it.
Yeah, I think they're doing a pretty good job price-wise of kind of keeping things in check, and as much as any of the gaming systems do. And I think because of that, maybe it's not necessary. Like you said, I'm sure they will come, whether it's Nintendo Gold Points 2 or whatever it's going to be. There's going to be some sort of sequel to it. Mentioning Club Nintendo, it feels like that was the online sentiment as well, that it was just really popular, and this was kind of like a downgrade. And then, what is this new one going to be? Are they going to maybe go back to like a Club Nintendo? Like, hey, you remember this thing you really liked? It probably won't be as good, but here for nostalgia, let's bring this back.
It's so weird because compared to the other game systems out there, they're often their own little world. I think if they felt like they had to compete with a Sony and a Microsoft more head-to-head, maybe they would be more inclined to maintain loyalty programs. But since they're kind of in their own universe, I think maybe they don't feel that's a necessity.
Yeah, I think that's probably more the case. And I think because of that, maybe it won't be a great follow-up. We'll see. I mean, that could be something that gets announced at the Direct and at the beginning of April. We'll see if they kind of talk about what's to come as far as new loyalty systems, new clubs, whatever it's going to be. But again, if you have points, and maybe you didn't even realize, like Mike, you didn't even realize you had points, you're going to have 12 months to spend them, so you don't have to rush out and spend your $1.25.
Takes me back to that time I was at Best Buy. Weird thing is, I feel like I was a member of their loyalty program, but there was the one cashier, this older lady that was just like,
she was there forever.
Yeah, she was just like, hey, do you have your rewards card or whatever it was, or reward zone or whatever they called it at that point in time? I'm like, oh no, that's okay. And her only response to try to nudge me in the direction of signing up was, you get points. That's all she told me. You get points. Which apparently was true. I'm not doubting that, but it was just like,
that's
as someone who spent some of my earlier years working in retail, namely Blockbuster, it's just like, I wonder if my sales pitches were that uninspired and depressing. Like, hey, you want the Blockbuster rewards program?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like, maybe at the end when it was like, this is coming to an end. We don't really care.
When they
now.
wanted you to sell Dish Network, like,
yeah,
I wouldn't buy Dish Network. Why would I want to sell that to somebody?
Oh, those are the good old days for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely a different time. But definitely if you have points, or if you don't know if you have points, maybe go check them out and see if there's
Ask your doctor.
Ask your doctor about your points if you have some sort of issue with that. Let's roll to our final news story of the day. This was just interesting to me, and not even so much about this specific story as kind of a general trend. The news came out on Crunchyroll this week that One Piece is returning to Fenway Park for another Boston Red Sox collab. They'll have themed jerseys and hats. That'll be on May the 3rd, as you see there, and there's the picture of the jerseys.
The jersey's kind of sick looking.
It is. Like, I give them
honest.
credit. Like, they have gone all out for this. Obviously, first off, your thoughts on this, because obviously this is they're doing this again. The other thing, it's interesting to me that they are picking baseball of all things to do this with, because we talked about last week that they're going to be rolling out these Nintendo Pokemon Go events at several baseball games over the summer. Of course, last year, Holo Live, the VTubing unit out of Japan, did a big collaboration with the Dodgers, which, whether you think that helped the Dodgers win the World Series or not, probably their $8 billion payroll had something to do with it as well. But still, I mean,
both key factors.
Both key factors. Gargura certainly key down the stretch in the playoffs. But, it's kind of wild that baseball, of all things, is kind of where they're like, yeah, that's how we're going to get to the young people and the anime fans, is we're going to do these baseball collabs, which I love baseball, so I have no gripe with it. It's just interesting to me that that's kind of which sport they've picked to target in the U.S.
Yeah, reading the story and just kind of knowing of the prior collaborations in the Pokemon Go thing, I couldn't help but think of Excel Saga.
Yes.
When Il Palazzo was explaining, like, the most popular sport in America is bowling.
Bowling.
All the kids love bowling. And this gives me that same feeling of, like, someone in Japan is like, well, obviously baseball, it's their sport. It's America.
And Shohei Ohtani's the greatest athlete in the world,
like,
so why not?
He didn't go over there and play in the NFL.
Right.
He's not playing in the NBA or PBA. Or,
well, the NBA was also in the bowling episode.
Yes, weirdly enough. Less factual Professional Bowling Association from Excel Saga, which everyone should watch if you haven't.
That's a great series. That episode, the Bowling Girls episode, may be one of my...
Spike Spencer is the host of the Bowling Girls show.
That's one of the top 5 funniest episodes of any show of all time.
So great. But yeah, that was my first thought. So then you think, like, Major League Baseball might be one of the sports organizations that's most keen on trying to pull in a younger fan base and maybe more open to these kind of collaborative efforts. So, it kind of works in a weird way, because you can also tie it into the fact that baseball's really big in Japan, and maybe you can bring in some of the more otaku fandom into baseball, and then they realize that this holds relevance in Japan. There are plenty of baseball, anime, and manga out there. I think the only thing they're really missing at this point is really having one of those titles break through over here.
Yeah.
I think we've yet to get that baseball IP from Japan really hit on the highest levels, like a Haikyuu or something like that.
Well, and baseball, even at its core, is especially in this day and age, is a very nerdy sport. I mean, you're talking sabermetrics and all this other stuff that goes into analytics. They're so big in baseball now, and obviously old timers are like, no, like, I don't care about win share and wins above replacement and all that other stuff.
What they're missing is they need to take all the sabermetric statistics, throw them into some sort of formula that spits out a power level.
Yeah.
If you just had an individual statistic that rolls in all of those WAR and all that nonsense into one thing that's a power level, I think you'll get all of them.
Maybe we just need Moneyball the anime.
That could work.
Like, let's just recreate Moneyball the movie and as an anime and get all the original cast for the English version of it. Like, people would do it. Yeah, that absolutely wins over power scalers. You just show that on the screen when they come to the plate. Yeah. It's and there are other sports that do that. I mean, tennis is one in particular that has their UTR rating, which is based on results and all this other stuff that basically creates a number that represents supposedly how good you are. So
it's kind of like too when ESPN created their own like quarterback
that
power level
go over
that
so
wasn't
hot
passer rating.
Yes, and people hated it, and then it's like nobody ever speaks of it again. Like,
but yeah, I think that's how you do it. Is I need to know which one of these guys is Krillin, which one's Yamcha. Like, tell me that.
I know. I don't know who they are, but I bet they play for the Reds.
I was gonna say I could picture them in a Reds jersey. Not gonna lie.
Laying down dead in center field. Yeah, that pretty much sums up the Cincinnati Reds. Maybe there's some hope this year for the Reds, but yeah, it's interesting to see these crossovers with baseball, and we'll see if they continue and how successful they are. I mean, the HoloLive one did really well last year. I imagine the Pokemon Go one's going to do well, and this obviously did well enough that they're bringing it back. So if you're a Red Sox fan, get your tickets now for
I might get a ticket just for the jersey.
the jersey is pretty sick. I'm not going to lie. Maybe we'll – and, of course, the better these things do, the better chance that they're going to be brought around to other ballparks. So something to keep in mind. It is time to bring a wrap to this edition with the Empire Express. Mike, are you ready to wrap this thing up?
Let's do it.
Notable gaming financial analysts has predicted that the upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 will check in at $399 when it debuts later this year. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Switch launched at $300, the OLED Switch at $350. If anything, given where inflation is in 2025 versus 2020 or 2017, this might actually be cheap for the Switch 2. A man formerly known as Ricky Starks signed his NXT contract last night on NXT TV and will be known as Ricky Saints going forward. Do you like his new name?
It's fine. I mean, I think everybody will get used to it in a few weeks. And also, he's from New Orleans, so the Saints tie-in makes a ton of sense. And, the dude's going to get over or not get over based on his charisma. And I think he's got that in spades, and I think he'll do an amazing job on NXT television. Next week, when NXT comes to Cincinnati, we will see Moose defend his TNA X Division title against Lexus King in his hometown, and the Hardys will return to WWE television to take on the No Quarter Catch Crew on top of several other big matches. Does NXT draw 1 million viewers next week?
I think maybe they do. I popped for Moose's appearance last night on NXT, and the Hardys appearing on WWE television after Jeff's unceremonious exit from WWE and their not-so-stellar time in AEW. That could certainly bring in some extra eyes with what's already the most interesting weekly wrestling show.
For sure.
According to an executive producer for the Dragon Ball franchise, Dragon Ball Daima is not the series' planned 40th anniversary project. Does that surprise you, and what do you think it might be?
A little bit, until I read that this anime has been in production for like 6 years or something like that, and it finally got to the daylight. So whatever that 40th anniversary project is, we might not see for 5 years, but I'd like to see maybe some sort of Kai series for the original Dragon Ball. I think that would be wonderful, and just new animation stuff, but not sure. It would probably just end up being some sort of fancy merch or something, I'm guessing. Finally, Creed and Nickelback will headline the Summer of 99 and Beyond Festival, July 18th and 19th in East Troy, Wisconsin. Of the bands listed for this festival, who would you buy a ticket to see?
Honestly, I would go to see both headliners first and foremost. 1999 is kind of that wheelhouse for me, junior, senior year of high school. A good chunk of the lineup looks appealing, live, lit, Three Doors Down, Fuel. For nostalgia purposes, sign me up to all of it.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I would definitely get a ticket to go see this, and I think it'll be a good show overall. And again, like you said, 99 is definitely a wheelhouse for us, and I think it would definitely be a lot of fun.
Go check out Lit's A Place in the Sun. That's a classic album.
For sure.
I'm telling you.
I can't tell you the last time I listened to that album, but maybe I'll have to bring that back up this week. But on that note, it is time to wrap up this edition of the Nerdcast Empire's Nerdcast News Report for this Wednesday, February the 19th. Thank you to everybody for joining us on this edition. We really appreciate it, as always, and we'll be back with you on Friday morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time with another edition of the Nerdcast News Report, as we will wrap up the week's news and get you ready for the weekend. And then on Sunday, we will be back with another episode of Music Weekly, the music of February the 7th coming up this week. We are into the month of February, so make sure you join us 7 p.m. Eastern Time as we recap all the best new rock and metal on the Nerdcast Empire. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support. Big thanks to Mike for joining me in the studio. And a big thanks to everybody who joined us live on the Nerdcast Empire. That's going to wrap things up for the entire crew. I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.